A little while ago, we looked at places to do graffiti that are near unbuffable because of how hard it is for that pesky Buffman to physically get to them. But what if there were methods of doing graffiti so permanent that it didn't even matter where you did them and the Buffman had no chance? Well, those methods actually do exist. And today we are taking a look at the top 5 methods of doing graffiti that are so permanent the Buffman has no chance. And to keep it simple, we're looking at these ways of tagging graffiti in order of permanence or difficulty to remove. So let's get into it. And the 5th most permanent way to tag graffiti is really just one step up from using a permanent paint. And it's far from the most effective method, although it is one of the most practical methods, but it can still yield some impressive results if you know a thing or two about formulae in mops. And that 5th way is tagging with inks. And that might be an underwhelming 5th most permanent thing to tag with here, but there's 2 reasons in particular that it works so well compared to a paint. And I won't get too technical with these explanations, but here are the 2 reasons that the Buffman has so much trouble with this. Number 1, inks have soluble pigments in them, which means they seep into surfaces, and they also tend to have quite harsh agents or bases. So that gives it the ability to, number 1, bleed through any layers that are used to cover inks up, making beautiful ghosts of tags, like I'm sure you've seen many times. Secondly, though, this means that the pigmentation actually stains the surface, so removing it is much harder than it would be with a paint where it just sits on top of the surface rather than staining it. So that is why buffing rather than covering doesn't work so well for inks either. That being said, some bases are better than other, but the better bases are usually harder to get your hands on, more expensive, and without getting too complicated, generally all bases have one weakness or another. And although those inks may sound pretty strong by themselves, they pale in comparison to the rest of the items on this list in terms of permanence. And that includes the 4th most permanent method of tagging graffiti, which is glass and mirror scratching. Now from here on up the list, we are looking at methods of tagging graffiti that are particularly destructive and are certainly only used by a particular brand of graffiti artist for the most part, I guess you could say. These methods, like mirror and glass scratching, all tend to involve some sort of actual physical alteration to the surface being tagged. And with that being said, you can see how effective glass and mirror scratching can actually be if a graffiti artist wants something to be permanent. Basically, the only way to get rid of that is to replace the glass or mirror pane. Scratching is never the funnest way, in my personal opinion, to be creating tags or anything like that, because you are a little bit limited to this sort of style you can effectively put down, especially if you don't scratch stuff every day like most of us. But I guess some graffiti artists enjoy that. And that is the case once again with the 3rd most permanent option on this list, which once again involves changing the chemical composition of, again, glass. And that is achieved this time through glass etching, which is where you use very harsh chemicals in mops to change the chemical composition of glass. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on how this works, nor would I ever want to be an expert on this type of graffiti tagging, but this method involves getting your hands on chemicals that are so harmful that they often are not even sold in stores. And again, these chemicals used in a graffiti mop of a particular kind that can handle them will literally change the composition of the glass, so that the only way to remove it pretty much is replacing it. And just to be clear, when I said get your hands on these chemicals, I meant that entirely metaphorically, because if you ever did actually get these chemicals on your hands, you would very quickly regret it, trust me. And the second most permanent way, which is arguably the very most permanent way, you'll see why when we get to number 1, of doing graffiti tags is metal rusting. This outlandish method of tagging graffiti once again involves using highly acidic chemicals on the pH scale to literally change the chemical composition of a surface, in this case, certain metals which are susceptible to oxidization. The chemicals used for this kind of tagging speed up that oxidization or rusting process so that it's almost instantaneous, and you're left with letters which are entirely made up of rust. Now, technically, anyone who took high school chemistry was taught how to do this and which chemicals do oxidize. It's not really a secret, but that was so long ago for me that I couldn't tell you what chemicals they are or which acids in particular, and once again, I wouldn't really want to be an expert on this type of graffiti. It doesn't really float my boat. But that leads us to the black swan on this list, the one that overthrows the entire reality that we think of as permanence in graffiti. And this one is certainly up for debate in the comments section below. I left it for last because I figured it would be questioned by some as being a legitimate, true permanent way to do graffiti, and I'd love to hear your opinions on it. Please feel free to share below. I will read your comment, show it some love, and we can have a good little chat there. But that last most unbuffable method of doing graffiti is glow-in-the-dark spray paint. Yep, not what you were expecting, I get that. And this is one of those methods that probably hasn't really made its way into larger overall graffiti circles as a legitimate way of getting up. But that doesn't mean that it can't be effective. Using the art of camouflage in this case, by day, the Buffman might not even be able to see the tag is there, and by night, the tag can burn bright for the world to see. Like I said before, this one's a bit of a weird one. I'm a little bit undecided on it, so I'd love to hear your opinion on it. But if you did want to know more about the best places in particular to do graffiti that are totally unbuffable, you can check that video out on screen now. If you're enjoying the content, feel free to hit the subscribe button below, and if you want to support the channel, you can get yourself a little gift and pick up a Tags, Throws, and Pieces t-shirt or hoodie in my online shop, which is the first link in the description below. I hope to see you in that video on screen soon. Until then, peace.